good evening. So thank you very much for your time. Perhaps, and for those of us who may not have a full appreciation of what you have to do and your mandate, you can quickly take us through what the National Empowerment Fund does for entrepreneurs in the country.
Thank you, Vuyo, for having me. So essentially, the NEF was established with the exclusive mandate of driving the implementation of broad-based Black economic empowerment in the country, and we do this by providing both non-financial and financial support to Black entrepreneurs who will be seeking funding for startup, for expansions, for acquisitions, for procurement, and franchising support. So that's what we do. So we actually start, our threshold is from 250,000 rands, and it goes all the way up to about 75 million rands. But our viewers should not view the 75 million as a limitation, because we get involved in a lot of syndicated transactions where the NEF would initially de-risk the project. Let's say it's a 200 million or 1 billion rand project. We'll be working with our entrepreneurs to develop the pre-feasibility studies, feasibility, take the project all the way to financial close, where we'll then approach both our local and international funders for support. So that's our business model that we've been using.
Now, who qualifies, or what is the criteria that you use to select people for your projects?
So essentially it's about supporting Black-owned and Black-managed enterprises. So we have actually moved away from your passive shareholding structures where Black people would just buy a small, equity stake in a company. So we are looking at supporting Black entrepreneurs who want to roll up their sleeves and wake up every morning to go and run those enterprises. So that is our first criteria. But obviously we would look at the commercial viability of the projects that we'll be supporting. We'll also look at whether it's Black-owned. So anything above 51, percent, or in fact it has to be 51% Black-owned. So you can still do it in partnership with your white-owned partners, but you must actually have a majority stake in those businesses. And another fundamental criteria for us is job creation. So would be looking at supporting those enterprises that will be creating jobs, additional jobs for our economy. So it can be anything, it can be 2 jobs, 5 jobs, for as long as we are able to create those jobs for our economy.
Now, looking at how bad things have been in the last few years in the country, one would imagine that you've been inundated, people wanting you to fund their projects. But on the other hand, one would imagine that you're also keeping your eyes on the kinds of industries or areas of our economy that will actually take us forward. How tricky a balance has it been? Because, people would come desperate and thinking, you are the people who can actually help them. Yet, on the other hand, with the money you have at your disposal, you may think that actually a need is somewhere else.
So, obviously, as I have already pointed out, that we look at partnerships. We have developed partnerships. Let me use an example of the work we're doing within the petroleum industry in South Africa, where we have now supported more than 120 Black-managed and controlled petrol stations. So if you look at the impact that we're having there, I don't think we would have been able to have this kind of impact of supporting more than 120 petrol stations if it were not for the partnerships that we now have with most of the oil majors in South Africa, your engines, your Caltex, your BPs, your Shells, and so on and so forth. So, but we tend to focus on your small to medium size, companies, because we want to stretch the rand. Yes, so with, a capitalization of 2.4 billion that we received from the South African government in 2007, we have been able to support more than 1,000 black-owned and black-managed companies, and we're able to get additional funding by recycling the 2.4 billion. So we will fund a tranche of 100 entrepreneurs. They will start paying us back. Then it actually goes to the next black-owned enterprise. And all in all, we have now supported enterprises that are worth about, 7 billion rands. 7 billion rands is the capital that has been deployed directly into the South African economy. So those partnerships have helped. But you must remember, Vuyo, that we haven't received any funding from government for more than 10 years. So what saddens me is when we have to turn our black entrepreneurs back and tell them that we don't have sufficient funding. Just last year alone, in the last financial year, we received, applications for funding that were estimated at 33 billion rands. Can you imagine? And we're only able to do about 10% of that, so which is not enough. So there is a huge demand out there for, for supporting black entrepreneurs, even though some of them will be doing it in partnership with their white.
But are there exciting new areas that black entrepreneurs are getting into now, which have the hope of or bring with them the ability to create more jobs, but more sustainable jobs, the kind that the economy needs? Are there any particular projects that you've come across recently which sort of speak to that? Now, there's the non-traditional business areas that you believe carry a great deal of hope going into the future.
So I'll talk about the support that we have provided to one private healthcare group. You'll remember, Vuyo, that that sector is dominated by the Big Four. So when you get sick, you'll either go to a Mediclinic or which other one is there? It's your Big Fours. So
a report came out recently talking about the problems
yes.
Of that sector and how difficult it is for new entrants to get in.
So we decided, in partnership with a group of black doctors, to introduce competition to a sector that is controlled by what I would refer to as an oligopoly, because those four companies, they control about 75% of the private healthcare sector. So what was exciting is that we started with a small investment of 10 million rands. It grew to 50 million, all the way up to 100 million. So when it reached financial close, we invited other, potential equity partners, senior debt providers, and so on and so forth. And the value of that project is now estimated at about 3 billion rands. So that was a sector that was predominantly, owned and managed by your established, businesses. So we are also, very active in terms of supporting black women-owned enterprises in the townships, in the rural areas. Some of those women will be looking, for small financial support to open B&Bs, to open hotels, to start new, tourist attractions and so on. So tourism, I think, has a lot of potential in South Africa, because for us it's the low-hanging fruit as opposed to just focusing on your large industrial projects. Those are good, but they take a long time. And obviously your leisure, businesses, services-related sector, because even though we're saying we want to industrialize our economy, we see a lot of potential within the services-related sectors. Our manufacturing sector has been declining over the last 20 years. Remember, in 1994, it used to account for about 24% of our GDP, and it's down at about 13%. So we're saying yes, let's pursue those, investment opportunities that have been identified within the manufacturing sectors of the economy, but there are a lot of other opportunities within the services-related sectors.
Of course, I mean, there have been times when you've bent your fingers, so to speak, where things didn't go quite the way they were supposed to. And I'm more interested in the lessons that you've sort of learned from cases like, those of Cyril Ramaphosa, for example.
What was wrong with that?
I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying given the points of discussion that it generated, where other people felt that you should invest in certain areas and not in other areas, or you invest in people who do certain things and not others. And I'm more keen in the lessons you were able to learn during those types of
there are no regrets for me or for us as an organization in having supported that venture. You'll remember that the retail sector in South Africa is actually one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy. So what we had, observed as an organization is that if you go to areas like, Sandton shopping mall, you go to Hyde Park, you go to even the waterfront in Cape Town, the people who own those shops are not black people. But if you look at the international companies that are setting up at the waterfront, I'm sure you have seen the new area there. Even here in Diamond Walk, in Sandton, most of those shops are not owned by South Africans. So what happens? The people who are driving the sales of those goods and services are black, people. But when you look at where the ownership resides, it doesn't reside with black people or South Africans for that matter. So for us, we went to Parliament. We took them through our investment thesis and rationale. And by the way, that investment has been repaid in full. So if you are talking about the industrialization of the economy. So I think we need to find ways of supporting black-owned and black women-owned enterprises. So there are no regrets. I'm sure you saw. Did you read the Business Day today? Front page of the Business Day is talking about what Bidvest is doing in your leisure, in other services-related industries. Bidvest today owns your Sobe. SOB is, part of your leisure, industries. So that's where you would actually go and do your nails. Does it make sense that it's owned by Bidvest? So it talks to those those opportunities that we're seeing as the low-hanging fruit. And by the way, we got overwhelming support when we went to Parliament, because Parliament was saying, can you please, explain your business model or rationale here? We got an overwhelming support. So it was people who were misinformed. So I think our duty as citizens is to continuously, brief our people, and educate them about what is happening in all the key sectors of the South African economy.
Of course, funding in and by itself is not all that there is to give to entrepreneurs. Let's talk a bit about your non-financial support that you give.
So we have a suite of various product offerings. One of the things that we provide to black entrepreneurs would be the access to our online business plan toolkit, because we have realized as the NEF that if you look at the constraints that our black entrepreneurs are faced with, some of them, they wouldn't be in a position to give you the reliable financial information. They wouldn't be in a position to give you the cash flow analysis and so on. Business plans and so on. So what this business plan toolkit does, by the way, it's an online tool, so you just have to log in. So what it does is a step-by-step process. So it will prompt you, because we realize that when you say financial projections, people think, it's a rocket science, when it's very, very easy. So if you want, let's say you want to start a new petrol station, it will actually say, what is your literage? and then you just, put that data in. It will ask you about the location, the marketing analysis, and so on and so forth. And we are very proud of what we have achieved with this tool, because it doesn't just say to you that you must then submit your business plan to the NEF. You can still go and submit it to any of the commercial banks in South Africa. It has been accessed by more than 10,000 applicants over a long period of time.
So do you give people support, for example, in areas of, let's say, you bring in people who have expertise in the areas that the people you funded are operating in? Things like negotiating deals, for example, how to survive, because passion and the money you give, are only part of what these people need. They need to be able to get in there and actually learn the tricks, of the areas that they are operating in, but also be able to survive some of the, big problems or challenges that face particular areas, businesses from time to time.
So we have a well-developed and established post-investment division. So that's where we'll be providing a lot of mentorship, advisory services. So that happens post-investment. So we'll be visiting, we have a dedicated team of young lawyers, of engineers, who will visit our investee companies on a monthly basis. We also have, a group of your retired engineers who are sitting at home. They will say, we also want to play a role. We want to give back to our communities. So if you are from a hotel industry, if we have invested in a hotel, like we have an investment in Limpopo, we invested in the Amazon Hotel, those mentors would be coming from that particular background. They will be bringing in a lot of requisite skills. They will be bringing in a lot of knowledge. So they will actually handhold some of our entrepreneurs. We also have a workouts and turnaround units where we'll then move our distressed projects or transactions to that particular unit, where we'll be, working with turnaround strategies, because we don't want to just give up on our transactions because there's maybe one small thing that has gone wrong. So it will sit in the ICU until we have fixed all the problems that that particular company, was faced with, but by working in partnership with our turnaround. So we use the cradle to grave. We'll actually handhold you all the way until you decide maybe one day to go for a listing. That's what we've been doing.
Do you have any partnerships with universities, for example, that are supposed to develop knowledge and,
We'll work with some professors in developing. So we have a unit called Strategic Projects Fund. That is where we will develop like your large industrial projects. Let me use an example where we're developing a project that is looking at the manufacturing capability for disposable syringes. So that's very technical, it deals with people's lives. So we will then actually go and seek that particular partnership and guidance from some of the universities who are knowledgeable in that particular area. So that project has actually reached financial close, in that we were able to actually solicit equity support, venture capital funders to actually come and invest alongside the NEF.
That's all going to leave it for this evening. Thank you very much for coming through. Philisiwe Mthethwa, who is the CEO of the National Empowerment Fund.